Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sisters. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this Redskins report that feels like a celebration. Celebrate! We have rid ourselves, finally, after 10 long, arduous years, of one Prince of Darkness himself, Bruce Allen. He's no longer here. The deed is done. He's gone. Now, you know, I think I really started to celebrate yesterday. So it's kind of anticlimactic for me now. I'm excited, you know, but I think it was the initial finding out that he was going to be removed from his title that got me excited. Now, I needed him gone from the entire organization. And I think that's what today's closure and finality has brought me is exactly that closure and finality, knowing that he's no longer a part of this organization in any capacity. Now, they could be lying to us and he could still have some kind of relationship with Dan outside of the organization, and still Dan looks to him for advice and things of that nature. But as far as him actually having a title, having an actual job within the organization, that's dead, and that's good to know, because in order for us as fans to feel like someone else can come in here and have a fair shot to be successful, he couldn't be here. And so him being gone, it seems like it's turned a page. It's a new chapter now in this Redskins organization that we can now move forward and see what we have. And we'll talk about the hiring potentially of Ron Rivera. And it seems like all but a done deal now. It seems like it's a foregone conclusion and a formality that he will be the Redskins' next head coach. And I'll talk about what that will potentially mean. What are the pros? What are some of the cons? And we'll get into some of those things. And I'll try to keep this video as short as possible. But initially, I want to start out by just saying, man, it's been a long time coming, but Bruce Allen is finally gone, and he will no longer be in any part of this organization. And that feels good to be able to say. As fans, we've pushed for this over the last 2 years heavily. I mean, I think people have wanted him gone for probably 3-4 years now. But I think the real push started, last year, maybe even the year before that. But it gained traction last year. The hashtag started trending, hashtag fire Bruce Allen, and we finally were able to get him out of here. Now, it took 3-13. It took another bad season, one of the worst in Redskins history, to get him out of here. But it happened. At this point, as I've said numerous times, really don't care how it happened. I just wanted it to happen, and now it's done. The deed is done. We can move forward. Let's talk about the future of this franchise and stop looking backwards at Bruce Allen and his 10-year tenure that was an epic failure with this organization. So now let's kind of sum this season up and where we are right now. 3-13, not very good, not very good at all. But it didn't happen in vain, and that was the thing. Is the Redskins fans that wanted to beat the Cowboys and this, that, and the third, you were missing the big picture. You don't want 4-12 to go in vain. All right. And in this case, 3-13. You don't want to have a season this bad and have it go in vain. Getting the second pick in the draft. Now, again, a lot of that hinges upon what Mr. Young wants to do, and we'll have to wait and see. We haven't heard anything from him as far as what his future holds. I told you I'm a little skeptical. I still am confident that he'll do the right thing, because I get what going back to college, and if he really enjoys the college life, cool. You know what I mean? I can't tell that young man what he should or shouldn't do. If he feels like he can go back to college and really continue to enjoy what has probably been a great experience for him while having a chance at winning a national chip and potentially getting his hands on the Heisman, something that eluded him this year, maybe that's something that is a very alluring to him. Maybe that's something that is an allure that will draw him back to Ohio State. But for me, again, you're not going to get much higher than 2 in the draft, and next year he won't be 1 either, because then it will be Trevor Lawrence. So you're not going to get higher than 2 if you're Chase Young, and you don't want to risk injury. That's the thing, is you're healthy, you're able-bodied right now. You don't want a Tua Tagovailoa situation happening where you could see your stock drop because you're not a quarterback. You're a pass rusher. And so I'm not saying that you'll drop out of the first round like Jalen Smith did some years ago, but it could happen. Teams don't want guys that they can't have them help right now. So you're healthy. You're going to be the number 2 pick in the draft, guaranteed. Hard to pass that up. We'll see what happens, but we hold the number 2 pick in the draft. Whatever happens, whether he goes back to school or not, it's still a great pick in a great situation to be in because now we hold all the cards because we know what the Bengals are going to do with number 1. They're taking Joe Burrow. No doubts about it. So we already know that if someone wants Tua, if someone wants to come up to the number 2 pick because there's a guy there, maybe Isaiah Simmons starts to rise up the board. He had an excellent pick in the game on Saturday night. And so maybe he starts rising up boards and all of a sudden someone's enamored with this guy and they want to come up and get him. Hey, we're open for business. If Chase isn't there, there's still value in holding the number 2 pick overall in this draft. So feel really good about that. I actually really like some of the pieces that I've seen with this football team over the last couple of weeks. We'll talk about that at another date and time. That's not what we're here to do. Let's start talking about Ron Rivera and this potential hire for the Redskins. Now, I talked about Ron Rivera when he was first fired from the Carolina Panthers. I told you I really like Ron Rivera. I did not necessarily want him to be the next head coach of the Washington Redskins, however, because a lot of the things we heard. Now, this is the thing though that separates them. You know what? Let me start with the cons because I want to start with that, and then we'll kind of lead into the pros and why he was probably hired here in Washington, and then I'll start talking about what he's going to do in terms of a staff, and then we'll get into the particulars of this front office here in a second, but. There were a lot of charges, and my man Syndico came on and laid them all out for us beautifully when Ron Rivera was fired, and he pretty much said, "Look, he's not a great game manager per se in terms of the clock. I think he does have a good feel for when to go for it on fourth down, when not to, when to go for a 2-point conversion, when not to. I've seen that evolve, which is why he got the title of Riverboat Ron. But we haven't, and thanks for the super chat, Big John, man. He says, thanks for the news and your hard work for us. Hey, I appreciate that, Big John. Really appreciate that super chat. And I thank you guys for tuning in and always making this a family environment, man. Like I said, I always talk about us being family members. We are family members of the Burgundy and Gold, and we rock together. And so this is a joyous occasion for us. We've been through a lot of the trials and tribulations together. And there have been a lot more tribulations than trials, or excuse me, trials than tribulations. But we've been through it all together. And so the highs of the 2012 season with Robert Griffin III in the rookie year, the lows of you know the Scott McLuhan situation, the Shanahan situation, Bruce Allen, Kirk Cousins, and you like that. 2015 was a high, but we've seen many more lows and highs, and so hopefully we're going in the right direction now. So Rivera was also charged with being a guy that um, was too loyal to players to a fault. Um, he was a guy that rocked with his veterans maybe a little bit longer than he needed to. A DMV fan 123, I appreciate you, man. Says I've been waiting for you to go live. Celebration, celebrate. Okay, we finally got Bruce Allen's ass out of here, man. Celebrate. All right. Um, appreciate that DMV 123, man. Really appreciate that super chat as well. So that's something that we've seen from him in his stint in Carolina where he was maybe loyal to a fault. I don't have a problem with coaches being loyal to players. Honestly, as an organization, um, you've got to have someone be able to step in and say, hey, this guy's over the hill. We've seen it with the Steelers where sometimes they're loyal to players to a fault. Maybe those guys stick around a year too long. We see it in the other direction with the Patriots where they get rid of guys a year or two earlier than you would think that they need to. So Ron Rivera falls somewhere in that realm there. He was also a guy that was charged with not necessarily managing the clock as well. And I think I mentioned that already, but want to reinforce that because that was something that we had issues with Jay Gruden. He's been really bad off of the bye week. That was something else that the Panthers fans complained about. Thank you for the super chat, OJ Turner, man. Really appreciate that, Juice. Good looking out. And it's something that when you look at with Ron Rivera, we've seen it with Jay Gruden. It's something that can become troublesome, but all in all, the pros outweigh the cons with Ron Rivera. The bye week thing, not having his team prepared after the bye week, that's something that We'll see if that continues here in Washington. But I can tell you this much: his relationship with players is something that is huge. The culture that he set in Carolina. Remember the whole tie incident with Cam Newton? He benched Cam Newton for the start of a game because he didn't have his tie on. Like, he set a culture in Carolina. They all loved him. And I think that's another reason he got the job here is because remember, he coached a young Cam Newton. Cam Newton's rookie season was also Ron Rivera's first year as the Carolina Panthers head coach. They grew together. He mentored and molded Cam Newton into the pro that he became. Now, you can say that Cam Newton's a little eccentric and does some things that may rub some people the wrong way, but that's Cam Newton's personality. But make no mistake about it, Cam Newton's a good person. Um, Gally Sanford, thank you for the super chat. Also, Stephen Kinsler, thank you for the super chat. Gally Sanford says, "Do you think Bruce will be gone? Being gone will draw new talent to the Skins? Maybe Trent stays now. It's possible. We'll see." Stephen Kinsler says, "Louie T, what we doing with Trent and Reed?" So I'll start with Gally Sanford's comment about Bruce being gone, maybe drawing more talent. Let's see who the general manager becomes. All right, let's see what the Redskins do with the president of football operations. There are so many different things that are left to be decided that we don't know right now. I can tell you this much. I think I know how the staff is going to fill out in terms of an offensive and defensive coordinator for Ron Rivera. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But does Trent stay now? Maybe Ron Rivera is able to get into his ear. Maybe he's able to talk to him. Maybe he's able to reassure Trent that this is an environment that he can win in and be comfortable in. Maybe Trent reconsiders. We'll see. There's a lot to be left to be decided. Right now, everything's kind of fluid. It's a moving situation that we don't have any resolution to in terms of answers. We'll find out. I don't see Trent wanting to come back, but that was when Bruce Allen was still a part of this organization. Now that he's not, we'll see what happens. As far as Stephen Kinsler is concerned, I think Jordan Reed's going to either retire or the Redskins are going to move on from him altogether. I'd like to see Jordan Reed just retire, honestly speaking. The concussions have become a problem. There's life after football, and he needs to start taking that into consideration. And I think Jordan Reed probably hangs it up. He needs to. And I think if he doesn't, the Redskins will go ahead and move on from him. I'd hate to see him try to give it another shot with another team. But at the end of the day, I think that's what happens with him. If Trent Williams doesn't want to be here, he'll be traded. He should have been already traded. He shouldn't still be here, but he will definitely be traded this offseason if he isn't on board with the new organizational pecking order and the way things are set up. If he doesn't want to be a member of this team, he will be traded. I can assure you that this offseason. And I expect nothing less than a second for him. Preferably, I wanted a first, but at this point, we probably missed our opportunity, our window of opportunity to get a first for him. So that's what I see happening with that, Stephen Kinsler. Thank you for the super chat once again, both of you guys. Ron Rivera is a guy that I think they look at as a mentor for Dwayne Haskins. Again, there are similarities between Haskins and Cam outside of them just both being black. They're young. Both were deemed to be immature when they first got into the league. And Rivera was able to take Cam Newton, mold him not only into a successful football player, but into a really good man off the football field. And some of that was already embedded in Cam Newton. But, a lot of people like to see the electricness of Cam Newton and just throw him into a bucket of saying, that he's selfish and all of this stuff. And I honestly don't know where all of that stuff comes from. But what he's done with that organization, what he had done in Carolina, was he established a culture, a winning one at that, and a culture that said we're going to be a tough, physical, family-oriented football team. We're going to care for one another. We're going to play for one another. And that's not something we've had in Washington. We've had a lot of finger pointing. We've had an organization that hasn't been clean on nor off the field. His teams seem to be very disciplined. I could be wrong about that. I haven't been watching the Panthers as closely as say, a Panthers fan. But normally when I watch the Panthers, I see a team that is usually organized in terms of how they go about their business. They're not heavily penalized. The structure of the team seems to be intact. And you're going to get a guy that is going to take responsibility for things that either go right or don't go right. And that's something we've also lacked here is accountability. And he's going to provide that for us here as well. I think when you look at Ron Rivera's body of work, he's a guy that's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to NFC Championship games, or one. He's been to a NFC Championship game, but he's a guy that has won double-digit games multiple times in his stint with the Carolina Panthers, including 15-1, which we haven't seen the likes of that since 1991 here. So it took him 3 years in Carolina to take them from a 2-14 team to a 12-14. We're hoping that he can do that here. It may not happen overnight, and I think we still got a ways to go. But if you look at what he's been able to do and where we are as a franchise, there are real staggering similarities to when he took over in Carolina to where we are right now. They were a 2-14 team. We are a 3-13 team. Cam Newton was a rookie quarterback. Dwayne Haskins is going into his second year. There are a lot of similarities. You know, they were a downtrodden franchise. We're a downtrodden franchise. They were looking for a culture change in Carolina. We're looking for a culture change here in Washington. There are a lot of similarities. And the thing that I like the most is that we were looking for a coach with experience. We were looking. I told you, it'd be nice to go out and get one of these college guys, one of these Eric Bieniemy. It would have been nice, but you just don't know. There isn't a track record. There isn't a body of work that we can look at and say, all right, this guy knows how to get it done in this league. All right. You weren't going to be able to say that with a Matt Rule or a Eric Bieniemy or even an Urban Meyer, even though we've seen his body of work in college. We haven't seen that in the NFL. This is a guy that has gotten it done with grown men. It's one thing to do it in college with a bunch of impressionable, 7, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, okay? It's another thing to be doing it with grown men, with families, with kids. Ron Rivera has done that. So we know he's capable of leading a franchise into the right direction. And so I'm anxious to see what he does. I think these are some of the moves he's going to make with his staff. The Cleveland Browns just fired Freddie Kitchens, or they fired him last night after the Browns lost yesterday to the Cincinnati Bengals. And on that staff was a guy that used to work in Carolina under Ron Rivera and Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks was his defensive coordinator before he got the head coaching job in Arizona. So Wilks right now is looking for work. You know how this goes. I talked about this yesterday, how this is a boys club. All right. And everyone has friends and you hire your friends. It just so happens that usually your friends are actually good at their job. And in the case of Steve Wilks, he can coach defense. That's how he got the job in Arizona. Now, it was a disaster in Arizona. And even when you look at the Browns this year, their defense was not bad. It got worse when their best defensive player, Myles Garrett, ended up getting suspended. But that was a really solid unit in Cleveland. And I think they feel like he's going to be able to come in and take what is a very talented defensive unit and start to get the most out of them. And I can tell you this much. He is a 4-3 defensive guy. Is Steve Wilks. So if he comes in here, the Redskins are going to morph back into a 4-3, which is what they should be, which is music to all of our ears, because this is a 4-3 defense right here in Washington. This is not a 3-4 defense. So hopefully Steve Wilks comes in here, and I think that's going to be the hire. It would shock me if he wasn't the next defensive coordinator here in Washington. Offensive coordinator is going to remain Kevin O'Connell. I think that was a part of the job. And I think that's one of the reasons they went with a defensive-minded head coach in Ron Rivera, because remember, Rivera was an ex-Chicago Bear football player, part of the 85 Bears. He was a defensive coordinator in this league before he got the head coaching job in Carolina. So he's a defensive-minded guy. And when you look at Ron Rivera, he's going to be able to take this defense, focus on that side of the football, and I think he's going to leave the offensive side of the football to Kevin O'Connell. I think that was part of the job. Whomever took this job, and I think that's part of the reason the Redskins went defensive-minded coach, because they felt like they already had an offensive guy that they trust in O'Connell about. And this is down the line, is that O'Connell is going to blow up. And just like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan before him, he's going to find work elsewhere. And Matt LaFleur, add him to the list of ex-Redskins assistants that have found success elsewhere. And I think he's going to, in the next 2 years, Dwayne Haskins in this offense is going to be rolling. And Kevin O'Connell is going to get interest from other teams. He's going to end up landing himself an NFL job. And we're going to see yet another talented, offensive minded guy roll right out of the building. That's what worries me, is that Ron Rivera will be here for, I guess, the foreseeable future. I'm anxious to see what kind of a contract he gets. Remember Jay Gruden got a 5-year deal, which is rare for first time head coaches. Rivera is not a first time head coach. So will Snyder be willing to commit to him for 5 years? Remember, coaches are unlike players. Their contracts are fully guaranteed. So if you sign a head coach to a 5-year deal, most likely Snyder's going to want to keep him here for 5 years, if not five, at least four, because you don't want to be paying a guy for him not being here. And Snyder's never one to waste money. So you remember they tried to run Jim Zorn out of here and make him quit, so they didn't have to so they didn't have to pay him the remainder of his contract. And remember, Zorn said, "I'm going to comply." He wasn't going to give up that extra bread that was coming his way. So Snyder doesn't like to waste money. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a 4-year deal for Ron Rivera or if it's a 5-year deal for Ron Rivera. I'm thinking it's going to be 5. I think it's going to be 5 for Rivera. That will give him the stability that he needs to build something here, and allow him to bring in a staff that I think will allow the Redskins to compete sooner rather than later. Nonsense guy on the defensive side of the football. He's respected, but he doesn't play any games. So that's something that I think we need on the defensive side of the football. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about Kevin O'Connell getting to continue the progress that we saw late in the season, and that connection that we feel like him and Dwayne started to build. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll get some new pieces back next year, some new toys, including Bryce Love, who will be interesting to see how he does. Hopefully, Geis is back healthy. I think the continued maturation of Steven Sims, Kelvin Harmon, and Terry McLaurin is fascinating stuff. Steven Sims continues to make plays. We saw it in the Dallas game. You know what? I said to myself as I was watching the game yesterday, Hale Hinches. Remember I laughed at Bill Callahan when he named Hale Hinches as one of the young nucleus players on the offensive side of football. I laughed hysterically and I mocked him. Hey man, I actually am starting to like Hale Hinches, man. I really am thinking that there's a place on the team for him. Whether it's the third tight end or he's a backup tight end, and he's not the first option. Obviously, we need a tight end, but I don't necessarily feel like we need an overhaul at the tight end position now. If you told me that we were going to go with Sprinkle and Hinches, and then we went out and got a big time tight end either in free agency or in the draft, I'd be totally cool with that. I'd be fine with that. Now, we need a number one tight end. None of those guys that I just mentioned are number ones, but I could see Hale Hinches being a solid number 2 option, or even Sprinkle for that matter. Even though I don't trust Sprinkle catching the football as consistently as even Hinches. I think Hinches does some really good things, man. I've been impressed with him, to say the least. Anyway, there's talent on that side of the football. We know there's talent on the defensive side of the football. So it's interesting to see what happens with this organization. I think that's what you're going to see on the in terms of the coordinators. Now the big question will be, what do the Redskins do in the front office? There's a shakeup that's coming. Obviously, no more Bruce Allen, so there's no president of football operations right now. So, are they going to promote from within? Are they going to go outside of the building and hire a Louis Riddick to be their GM? And are they going to promote somebody inside the building like Eric Schaefer, the president of football operations? Are they going to promote from within with Kyle Smith and make him the GM? Like, what's the next step for the front office? That's the next domino to drop after they officially announce the hiring of Ron Rivera. But that seems to be a formality at this point, that he's going to be the Redskins' next head coach. And I'm anxious to see what happens with this football team moving forward. But I can tell you this much. If the Redskins are going to become a competitive team sooner rather than later, it's just as important what they do in terms of hiring the next head coach, what they do in the front office. I think those two need to be married together There needs to be some kind of synchronicity there. We haven't had that in this organization since since Dan Snyder took over. There has been no synchronicity from front office to the head coaching position, and we need that. We need someone to come in here, and Dan needs to take a step back. Did you guys read the statement that he released? I'll see if I can find it here in a second for you guys. The statement that he released in terms of this organization and how he's failed this organization. Well, he didn't take any culpability um, for the firing, the uh, the losing that we've seen with this franchise. Trying to track it down for you guys over the last decade. He didn't really take the kind of responsibility that we were looking for. But it was a step in the right direction nonetheless when I read the statement. It was probably more than I was assuming that we were going to get. So let's see if I can track it down and see where that statement is. I wish I would have saved it. I think it might be in here. And let's see if I can track it down. Nope, I can't find it. But Daniel Snyder issued a statement um, pretty much saying that it wasn't good enough what had happened under Bruce Allen, and that the organization needs to be better for the fans and this, that, and the third. And it sounds good, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. We've been a train wreck of an organization over the last, 2 decades under Daniel Snyder. And until he's willing to take a step back and allow the football people to actually do their jobs, we're going to continue to see much of the same. So, for as exciting as a day like today is, where we finally move on from Bruce Allen and we're getting a new head coach and all of those things are taking place, it's still the elephant is still in the room of Daniel Snyder, and he needs to take a step back. First of all, he needs to hire the right people. All right, people that he trusts. Well, I don't really give a damn if he trusts Louie Riddick, fine, do it. But if he trusts Kyle Smith and he wants to keep it in house, fine. But he needs to allow these guys to do their jobs. He needs to take a step back and allow these guys to do their job. So, Reese says, I heard that Rick Smith is a GM candidate for you guys. We'll see. There have been a lot of names thrown around. Rick Smith, Louie Riddick, as I mentioned, Kyle Smith, House candidate. We'll see what the Redskins decide to do, but I think that's the next big step is figuring out what this organization is going to do in the front office. But I'm excited. I'm excited, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not going to jump off the deep end about the hire of Ron Rivera. I think there are some good things that he can do and bring to this football team, including some stability, something we haven't had, over the recent, 3 or 4 years, dating back to the Kirk Cousins debacle. We got a quarterback that I think we feel like we can move into the future with. I know some of you are still on the fence about him. That's fine. But you got a quarterback, you got a coach. Now I want to see what they decide to do with GM and team president. And there seems to be a little bit of momentum building for this thing to be going in the right direction. We've been a laughing stock of this league for quite some time. It's time for us to start trending in the right direction. And the NFC East was a joke this year. We weren't even close to being competitive. It's time for the Redskins to be competitive once again. And I think this move of hiring Ron Rivera and getting rid of Bruce Allen, more importantly, getting rid of Bruce Allen, I think that gives the Redskins an opportunity. And as someone asked earlier, I would want to say it was, let me see if I can find that super chat. Stephen Kinsler, another super chat. I appreciate that, man. He says, bro, Stephen Cornelius Sims, the fifth, is a beast. That he is. He had another outstanding game yesterday to wrap up the season. I'm really looking forward to him continuing his progress. Gally Sanford asked, with Bruce being gone, will we be able to draw more talent to this team? I think the answer is yes. I really do. I think look. I'm not saying guys weren't coming here because of Bruce Allen, but it's a new day. It's a new day in Washington, and I think that's going to allow this culture to change, and it's gonna. Winning will solve a lot of things. You start winning, and players will want to come here. You change the culture, and players will want to come here. R.A. Williams, aka Black Mullet 40. Appreciate the super chat, my man. Really do. Thanks a lot. Um, let's see. I'm gonna make sure I get any and every super chat in here out of the way before we move on. Um, I would. And Dan Calloway makes a great point. He said that he'd love for a guy like D'Angelo Hall to be a part of the coaching staff. I'd love to see him coach the secondary. I don't know if he wants to do that anymore. Remember, he had his sights set on being the Redskins secondary coach and then decided to go in a different direction. Um, Now he had his sights set on being in the front office. I think ultimately that's where he wants to be. But if he wants to get his foot in the door as a coach, I'd love to have D Hall back as a defensive backs coach. I think he could be like a Raheem Morris. You know how he's been a beloved defensive backs coach and ultimately got a chance to be a head coach in this league, and now he's going to be the Falcons defensive coordinator next season. Players love Raheem Morris. Say what you want about him. He was loved in Tampa. He just didn't get it done in Tampa, but the players loved him. And I can see D'Angelo Hall being another one of those types of guys where the players just flock towards him because him being an ex-player himself, knowing the ropes of the game and being able to communicate with guys and holding them accountable, I think that would be something that would serve this team well. So I'd actually like to see something like that take place. But I don't know if that will take place or not. We'll see what happens. Gally Sanford says, thanks for the super chat once again. Gally Sanford says, glad to see you not in black today. Hell, no black today. Today's a day of rejoicing. All right. Today is a day for happiness and togetherness and hope. Something that we've lacked for years. Hope. We got it today. And that's something we haven't been able to say for a very long time. It seems like for way too long, we haven't had hope. I think the last time we had legitimate hope probably was after the 2015 season when Kirk Cousins took it to the playoffs, but then he didn't get the contract. I think as an organization, from a health standpoint, this is the first time we've had hope since they hired Scott McCloughan. I think that's the last time that we had hope that things were going in the right direction. So I think that kind of coincided with the 2015 you like that Kirk Cousins season because McCloughan had just gotten here. So I think that's the last time we had this kind of hope. I feel good about this team and where we're going, and let's see if we can keep this going, this momentum going by making the right hires. And let me say this, I'm going to end on this note. I would love for Bill Callahan to come back and coach the offensive line. Now, I don't think that's going to take place. Generally, when a guy gets the interim head coaching position and then isn't promoted to the head coaching position on a permanent basis, he doesn't come back. All right. He feels like guys have an ego, as I've mentioned this before. You have an ego and you feel somewhat disrespected. You feel like the job that you did wasn't appreciated. And I think Daniel Snyder would be remiss if he didn't acknowledge the fact that Bill Callahan did a hell of a job, not only as an offensive line coach, and I also have to take some crow, and I need to give out a double O to Bill Callahan because remember I said, man, he ain't even all that as an offensive line coach. If you remember that before the season started, I said, you want me to believe you're a hell of an offensive line coach? Take Eric Flowers and make him a hell of an offensive lineman. He did that. So okay, I was wrong. Bill Callahan, I'm offering up this double O as an apology. I hope you accept this olive branch that I'm extending to you. And whatever you decide to do next, as long as it's not in the NFC East, I wish you nothing but the best. All right. But if he would like to stay on as the Redskins offensive line coach, I would love to have him. I don't anticipate that happening. I don't think he wants to stay here. That's fine too. But in any event, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. I thank you guys for joining me. Man, this has been a great occasion. Now, we're going to stay tuned to see what happens. And tomorrow, I will officially be back from my bye week, even though it was a semi bye because I've been conversing with you guys back and forth. Either way, um, I'll be officially off of my bye week and I will be back in my studios and we will be able to chop it up in a more, I guess you could say, a more, uh, a more, I don't know. I can't think of the word. I had a brain fart, but we'll be able to chop it up the way that we normally do. All right. In a more professional way. How about that? So, I'll probably open up the phone lines and maybe we'll have more news once we, get there and maybe we'll know who the new general manager is. Maybe we'll know. And these things may not happen for a little while, but maybe we'll be able to have seen Ron Rivera's press conference by then and see what he has to say and kind of learn who he's hiring. And we'll see if the guys that we've predicted will be, his offensive and defensive coordinators come to fruition and see how he fills out his staff. And we'll see what happens. But in any event, um, let's get out of here. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our newly revamped Washington Redskins. I thank you guys for all of the super chats. I thank you guys for all of the comments. And I thank you guys for joining us this morning and all coming together, man. This feels good. Feels good. Feels good. Feels good. Now, let's see what the Redskins decide to do. All right. If anything big happens, if they hire a GM or team president or anything like that, I'll probably be live yet again. But in any event, I'll see you guys a little bit later on. Have a good one. Celebrate! Bruce Allen is out of here. The deed is done. No more cloud of darkness from the Prince of Darkness in Washington. Let's see what else happens.